Okay, y'all, I need to find a calm space right now because the news headlines and what's going on is overwhelming. Too many people are being reactive, and you lose your head in an emergency situation and more damage is done. So how do we stay calm? How do we filter out some of that? I need to look past the storm and find solutions. There's a few things that come to mind. I think of the scenario of scuba diving, and you don't know which way is up anymore. It's dark. You're in deep waters. You have to have the presence of mind to look for the bubbles. And those bubbles, in my mind, are words and actions of people that are truly public servants, are truly pro democracy. And then I know which way to turn my efforts. The second example is the American bison, the buffalo, and a storm. The storm is upon us. We can't flail around and hunker down. We need to walk into the storm. And that's how we get to the other side of this constitutional crisis. You know, it's like Trump brought this constitutional crisis, yada, 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 yada. No. Trump is in the right place at the right time, and other actors that have set this thing in motion, who have built the mechanics of this, are making a lot of progress for building a country and a system that does not benefit the common man. It benefits the few. So here's our message: from ignorance to empowerment. Civics learning. If there's a bus going to pick us up, take us to civics learning, we're sitting at the bus stop, got news for you. The bus never left the barn, not for our generation. Not for my kids' generation. There's going to have to be changes for my grandchildren. It may be me learning and then teaching them. This path from ignorance to empowerment, we're going to have to walk. That bus ain't coming. So finding a place of calm, finding a way to get through this. I'm going to bring us to look at some things I was looking up. One of the voices that I believe will lead us towards a place of predictable values is Jack Smith. I really encourage you to look at his whole testimony or deposition. It's in the playlist Rule of Law. Ida B. Wells, this presentation, this discussion of her, 8 minutes, talks about her book, The Red Record. And just briefly, I didn't catch it all. It's like, where's the time to do everything? She did not approach reform from a place of the horrors and the violence. She approached it from calculated argument about rule of law. So you know where Jack Smith's testimony? Right next to hers, right next to her in that playlist. So around the 6-hour mark, we have his deposition, or it does say depot. There's another thing to look at. If I go to my playlists, we're going to talk a little bit more about...
I'm Sophie.
Oof. Let's tell Sophie to be quiet. All right, that's going to be a minute. We'll have to come back to that. So, Jack Smith is probably the best of us in this moment right now. I wanted to go to the transcript and share with you what got me really thinking about how stark of a contrast he skillfully presents. He's asked about the firings of his people, firings of his team, firings of the Jan 6, Department of Justice prosecutors who worked on Jan 6. What are the consequences, right? Or let's see. Are you willing to make a statement? What is his statement on those firings? And he says, yeah, I think what has happened to career prosecutors and career FBI agents is awful. It's contrary to the rule of law. It's contrary to who I think we are as a country. One of the agents in our case, he served his country overseas multiple times, war zones. Family are dedicated public servants. Wife's family, dedicated public servants. He got fired for doing his job 2 weeks after his wife died. I went to the funeral. I saw his family. I saw a church full of public servants. No reason a person like that should have to go through that. You know what, y'all? I think we're getting feedback from this speaker.
Goodbye.
We'll turn that off. Here's the thing that really struck me about. He's very gracefully has the cloak of professionalism on during this entire deposition, 8 hours. They had a lunch break, whatever. It was off record some of the times. He apologized for getting emotional, and his demonstration of emotion was tapping the table. Decorum matters to this man. I miss that. He says, I am getting emotional. I'm sorry about that, but I just think that's wrong. So, dig in just a little bit more, and they ask him, what's the consequences of those firings? And he answers, and again, the contrast is glaring. Well, if you take the position that you cannot work in the federal government unless you have a political allegiance to the president, I think there are many harms to that. Our country tried that in the past. It's called the patronage system. And what we learned in our history, and this would be if it's a Democrat or a Republican, it would not matter. But what we learned is that those servant systems are rife with not only corruption, but with incompetence, because the people who have these jobs, they didn't get them because of merit, because they dedicated their career to learning national security law, to learning how to properly investigate a case. They got their jobs because they're loyal to a particular person. That's not fair, but it also makes for people who really don't know how to do the work. So I think that's a danger to the country. It saddens and angers me in the short term, but I think there are great costs to us long term if that's the direction we are going. Powerful words, calmly delivered, irrefutably argued that this Trump et al. Administration is diametrically opposed to the rule of law. The other, let's go back to, here we go. So this is fault lines in the Constitution, and I have a playlist, fault lines in the Constitution. Our declaration complements it really well. Danielle Allen makes some good arguments. And then I've got me in there, just kind of giving you a place. I'm not sure why Tora the Kitchen's in there, but whatever. Arguments for amending the Constitution. I read Professor Levinson's testimony given 2004, I think. And then there's a book tour. So Mr. and Mrs. Levinson are both involved in that. But this book here as a graphic novel is discussed. I think it's a book review. Yeah, comics review. So that brings me to why do I say Sandy Levinson is a voice for knowing which way is up, right? The bubbles. Which way are the bubbles going? First of all, this is free and open access, so copyright infringement should not be an issue. We're going to discuss this a little bit. But 2010, and this was in print 2010, so 2009, there was a collaboration and they finished this, but it represented at that time a couple of decades, if not more, for Sandy Levinson's teaching career as a professor, as a scholar. Now we're digging into political philosophy, and that's a deep well. I can sip on it a little bit, and enough to get a taste of the arguments, and enough to get a feel for what makes sense. I would hazard to say that in 17 years ago, we're seeing discussed what we're living right now. So if we understand this, we understand the mechanism that is in place and where it's breaking down, then it'll help us, once we get the other side of this storm, it will help us to build a framework that is more resilient, that serves our nation. So rebuilding democracy, reinventing democracy. The status quo, that's a loaded phrase, right? We have to make changes. We just do. And I'm looking at this table of contents, and it's reinforcing the argument, what I understand is the argument. It's reinforcing that. But constitutional dictatorship? Yikes. Yikes. From democracy to dictatorship. We're living through that. And Gene Sharp's From Dictatorship to Democracy is our lesson for how to dictatorship proof us when the time comes. But we got to look at this. Governing through emergency. Well, building executive power through constitutional construction. Presidential accountability and unilateral action, national security and domestic powers, the characteristic pattern of American constitutional dictatorship, distributed dictatorship. Remember the Project 2025 mandate for leadership, distributed dictatorship. Sounds like they dance together. Now, governing through emergency. What if that emergency is engineered? Prove me wrong that we're not living in a moment of engineered emergency. Then the president's ability to create reality? Wow. I'm going to substitute crypto schemes. Presidential crypto schemes? Our schizophrenic presidency? Yike, that's a loaded gun. So I'm scanning through this, and I can go to the conclusion and recognize the name Machiavelli and Hamilton, Weber, Schmidt, and there's some comparisons there. But I do see that all students of constitutionalism, including those who studied the presidency, must also be students of constitutional design. We forget the lessons of Machiavelli, revived in the past century by Watkins, Rossiter, and Frederick, and yes, even Carl Schmitt, at our peril. The notion of constitutional dictatorship may seem at first a contradiction in terms, but it is a reality that every modern democracy, like every ancient one, must eventually face. Yeah, that's the moment we're in. Pretty sure. So, walk with me. Ignorance to empowerment. Welcome to my kitchen.